First time I seen Sir Alex was at a Salford Boys game. I was at Man City, and he'd heard that I was a United fan, and I was playing next door to the Cliff. I was playing for Salford Boys on Lower Broughton Road, and he come along with Brian Kidd to watch me. So during the game, I spotted him. You'd never think now, under 15s, under 14s it was. Man United manager watching Salford Boys, and afterwards he was speaking to my mum. Later I would know that he was asking me to come down to train for United. So that was my first experience of actually seeing him in real life. And then of course I went down to train with United, and he was always there. He was always watching the young players play. It was amazing how he knew your name, he knew your mum's name, and not only me, but all the players and all the parents' names. It was unbelievable. I mean, I trained with the first team quite a lot. I think my first training session was like 15 with the first team, and then more and more as I got older, 16, 17. So I knew the lads, and obviously I knew Sir Alex. So my first full debut against City, I remember him naming the team, and he would start off with the goalkeeper, right back, and go along the team, and left wing was the last position he would say, and he would always give the team an hour and a half before. And then I always remember, Ryan, you'll play on the left. Now I thought I was in the squad, so I thought I would be sub. I never thought that I was starting. So as soon as he said, I was listening, but I wasn't like, did he say my name then? And I wasn't the nervous type, and that is the most nervous I've ever been. I'm getting sweaty palms and sort of thinking, right, okay, started thinking and homing in on what I've got to do in the game. But yeah, that was my thoughts when he named me for my debut for the first time. Like I said, I'd trained with the first team quite a bit, so I was familiar with the lads as well. And I was lucky, Steve Bruce, Brian Robson, Brian McClare, so many experienced players who helped me along the way. Obviously, as a United fan, I knew the pressure on the club to win that league title. Obviously, we had a good team, and more or less the whole season it was in our hands. It was a difficult end to the season, a lot of games in a short space of time. We started picking up injuries, and Leeds had the momentum. And yeah, from my experience now playing for so long, momentum is huge going into the title running. And we just run out of steam, and Leeds deserved the title. But I remember the lads who had been there the last 4 or 5 years thinking that was our chance. We won't get a chance like that again. And I think that was a lesson for me and for the rest of the players that, we won't let that happen again. So there was a real determination coming back pre-season that we're not going to let it happen again. We actually didn't get off to a great start, but then obviously everyone knows Eric Cantona come to the club, and it sort of gave everyone a lift. And from then on, really, it felt like we were going to win every game. I think he just fitted into the team straight away, to the team's strengths. His partnership with Mark Hughes, they just bounced off each other. And of course, with the wingers that we had, myself, Kanchelskis, Lee Sharp, he was the one who released us. And he was the one, when you had the ball, he was always that option, as well as going a little bit further up the pitch to Mark Hughes. So he was either in that little pocket, or you could go up to Sparky, he would always hold it up and then bring Eric into play, and then he was playing them little passes to me, to Andre, and to Sharpie as well. So he really complemented the team. He was the last piece of the jigsaw. He was that bit of magic that we were missing. And not only that, he scored big goals. He scored important goals. So he was just the icing on the cake, really. We were already a good team, but with him, we were a brilliant team. We were devastating in transition, because that was when we were our most dangerous. When the other team had the ball, they lost it. As soon as I get the ball, I knew Eric he was clever enough to find out little spaces, and you would play to Eric and you would just run. And obviously, even if you were back on your own box, the speed that myself, Kanchelskis, Lee Sharp had, we would play it up to Eric and just penetrate, running behind. And teams were afraid to give the ball away, which is, when you have the ball, you want to be confident, but you knew that if you give the ball away, you'd be sprinting back to your own box. And I think that's not only when we had the ball, we were dangerous, but especially when we didn't have the ball, we were a brilliant counter-attacking team. Recruitment is everything in any job, getting the right people for the right job. And I think at first, when you take over as manager like Klopp did, it's a big overhaul. I think you have to be, not lucky, but you have to be sort of fortunate that maybe you have a couple of young players coming through as well. And it's just that little tweaks, because you're not upsetting the team too much. So, yeah, at one point we bought the best centre-half, Gary Pallister, and then the emergence of Paul Ince, and then likes of Roy Keane, Eric Cantona coming in, and then we had the young players coming in '96 as well. So yeah, it's just you don't want to be buying 5 or 6 players and 5 or 6 players going out the window every transfer window. You want that just 1 or 2 that you recognise where you need to strengthen, and that's what the boss did. Roy and Ince never argued on the pitch. They complimented each other, even though they were both really fiery characters. They were both box-to-box midfielders. They were both, you see now a holding midfielder, attacking midfielder. They could do both. Roy and Ince as well, later in their career, drop back and become that pivot. But early on, they wanted to get beyond the centre forwards. And especially Keane, when he come, I think he scored 2 goals on his first game at Old Trafford. He could get up and down for 90 minutes. And the energy that we had in that team was scary. When you see the sort of the 4 in midfield, and obviously Eric was quick. Eric could get from box to box quick as well. So, yeah, we had real power and energy. And, yeah, like any team, that midfield is important. And we had, 2 of the best midfielders in Britain and perhaps Europe. We would stick together, we would sit next to each other on the coach. And I think it was more that, right, if Ryan can do it, then we can do it. He's got in the team, he stayed in the team. They've seen a young player who they've played with in the youth team go through, get into the first team and stay in the first team. So I think there's more of that, really. Regarding a role, they were all their own individual personalities and strong personalities. I think that's key, because Nicky Butt replaced Paul Ince, Scholesy more or less replaced Sparky, and David Beckham replaced Andrzej Kanchelskis, a fan's favourite. So for them to step into their shoes was huge. We all know they had the ability, but actually to have that mentality that, who were these kids, replacing 3 fans' favourites, really, that mentality to be able to do that and not be bothered about it, was important in their development. You were wary of them because they had that experience, that base of English back 4, David Seaman, as well as the Vieiras, the Petits, the Anelkas, the Bergkamps, that little bit of continental flair. And I always say it, they were a mirror image of ourselves. They could out-football anyone, and also, if it was ever going to get sort of a bit nasty, they could look after themselves, which was the same as us. We had men in our team, right through the spine, Bruce, Ince, Cantona, Hughes, Schmeichel. They had the same, Adams, Seaman. They were proper men, and when you stood in the tunnel next to them at that tight tunnel in Highbury, you knew you had to earn the right to play, and then you had to go for 90 minutes because they had a bit of everything. They had pace, they had power, they had the imagination of Bergkamp. So they were very much like ourselves, so it was like, oh, OK, we've got a team on our hands here. It was like later when we faced Juventus and we faced the big Europeans. You should always go into the game, mentally in the right frame of mind. But, yeah, when you go into Highbury, you sort of zoned in a few percent more, because you realised that you were in for a game, and if you didn't turn up, then you were finished. Both as individuals and as a team. You just constantly tested. Your concentration had to be there for 90 minutes. You couldn't make mistakes. You had to be on it physically. You had to be able to run more than them. They were great battles, whether it didn't really matter if we were at Old Trafford or if we were Highbury. We were equally comfortable going to Highbury, just like Arsenal were equally comfortable coming here. They were huge battles, together with the sideshow of the managers who looked like didn't get on. It was, as soon as it was Arsenal United at the weekend, that coverage would start on the Monday. As soon as the games had finished that week, then it seemed like the momentum was building and building and building towards that game. I think the manager sort of approached it sometimes aggressively to get the best out of us as well. And if he could sort of get anything up on the opposition's manager and the team, then he would do. You know, whether it be like killing them with kindness or being aggressive towards the manager. He said this, he said that about you, what are you going to do about that? So he was constantly finding ways to get that edge because he respected Arsenal, he respected Wenger, and he knew that it was the fine details that could perhaps get us that result.